My name is Richard Ferrer, and I can say I am cloud hired.
That yes, come and join and get cloud hired. I'm cloud hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
I'm Cloud Hired.
Hey, Go Cloud Architect family. I'm Cloud Hired.
So, I'm Cloud Hired, guys.
So I'll just say I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired.
I'm cloud hired thanks to Go Cloud Architects.
It worked for me, and now I'm Cloud Hired. Because of Google Architect program, I am Cloud Hired. See!
I am Cloud Hired. Thank you, Mike and the Glowcloud team.
Welcome, everyone. This is Mike Gibbs. I'm the CEO of Go Cloud Careers, and I've been an enterprise architect and all kinds of architects for a little over 25 years, ever since I left healthcare. And I come here once per week to be able to answer your questions. Because I know when I started my technology career, I heard so many things from all these people that wanted to get a job, and pretty much everything everybody told me was incorrect. And once I actually knew what it took to get hired, and I actually knew what the skills were for my job, I was able to go from certified to hired because I knew the things that I needed to learn. And I've done this for others for a long time. I've personally spent about 20 years now training others, and people that I've trained are now working at companies like Apple and Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Barclays Bank, JP Morgan Chase Bank, Palo Alto, NetSpoke, Zscaler, and so many other companies. And I just want to help you have that same success. So bring your questions. You're not sure how to go from sales engineer to a bigger role? Bring that question. I can tell you I've done it myself. Not sure how to go get your first architect job? I can help you there too. I can tell you what we've done for people like Yvonne, who went from waiter to working at AWS, or Balwinder, who was a stay-at-home mom who went over to Microsoft, or Jermaine, who went from selling landscaping gear to being an enterprise architect, or Wallace, who went from selling a sales rep to being an enterprise architect at JP Morgan Chase Bank. I can give you example after example. And whatever your career goal is, I just want to help you get there. And the best way to go there is to know what you need to learn and master the skills. Because when it comes down to hiring, I can tell you what we hire on. Can you do the job? Meaning, do you have the skills for this job, not somebody else's? And that's the biggest problem when we interview people. People have the skills for somebody else's job because they didn't know what the job was and they learned the wrong thing. So please ask questions. That's the biggest problem. And then we have other challenges with things we're looking for as employers, like the way someone communicates, the person's energy, enthusiasm, passion for the job, for example, their willingness to go above and beyond, their emotional intelligence, their ability to be a team player. So there's lots of things employers are looking for. And I want to make sure that you know whatever they are to how to use them as a competitive advantage. Now, I want to remind you of 2 free things that we have going on. We have a webinar tomorrow on how to become a security architect. We will go over the role. We will talk about the skills that you need for the role. We'll talk about what we actually do in the role versus what people think we do in the role. And then, of course, we'll be live on Zoom, and you can ask any question you have for upwards of 90 minutes. We love changing lives around here, and I look forward to meeting you on Zoom and doing anything I can to help you. That is tomorrow at 11 a.m. Normally it's normally 1 to 3 on Thursdays, but we're doing it earlier because, of course, we've got the free CCSK boot camp in the afternoon from 2 to 5, which we'd love you to join as well. Now, I also want to let you know that in the description of this video, we've got a lot of guides that I recommend you get. Guides on how to win the interview, for example, or skills you need to learn to become a solutions architect, cloud architect, enterprise architect, AI architect. We've got guides and they're all free and you can download them completely free in this discussion of this video. Guides on certifications, what have you. So bring me your questions and I'll do anything I can to be able to help you. Question: what is the best way to gain practical cloud architecture experience for someone new? So Adam, let me talk to you about what we do, and then let me talk to you about the skills that you actually need to be able to do these things. And when you understand what we do and the skills you'll need, then I'll be able to explain to you how to get practical hands-on experience. Because if you just set up a bunch of Linux machines and create WordPress websites, that's not going to help you at all as an architect. It might be if you wanted to be an engineer, but it's not going to help you at all as an architect. So the first thing we have to understand is, what does a cloud architect do? At least a good cloud architect. Well, the first thing they need to do is start with the executive team at the organization, and they need to find out where that business is going. Because if you don't understand the business and you don't understand where it's going, you can't design an architecture that's going to grow with the client or scale with the client or even enable what the client needs to be done. Now, some people skip that step because they don't have the business skills. And if they do, there's about an 80% failure rate in their architecture. So kind of hope that makes sense to you. So once we speak to the executive team, we need to know how that business operates. Imagine throwing a monkey wrench in a system because you changed the system but didn't know how it worked. So what we have to do then is we have to map out the business architecture. So we need to look at what the org chart is. We need to map out the key stakeholders that we need to be speaking to. We need to figure out what are the key business processes, like how does sales get done? So if we create a new architecture for sales, it's going to help the sales reps versus hurting them. We need to map out the organization's value streams, or what are those organizations' competitive advantages, so we can design a strategy that can help that business do better in its competitive advantage places. So all that has to come before we even examine the technology. Now, then we need to understand the organization's technology. So we typically have to create a team, build a team, and lead a team of people to evaluate the client's technology. Now, at this point, once we know what their technology is, you're going to need to create an architecture team because one person won't be able to do all the networking, security, IAM, AI, data science, and everything else that's going to go into the architecture. So you're going to need an architecture team, and you're going to lead that team to create the architecture. Now, before you create the architecture, you're going to assess the organization's readiness for change and their capacity to handle the various kinds of architectures, because you can't give the customer something they can't manage after the fact. So then what we do is we create the architecture, we bring it back to the client and its key stakeholders, we get their feedback, we tune the architecture, we bring it back to the stakeholders. We go through this process several times in reality because we have to customize the solution for the client. Now, once we know the client wants it, we have to do things like create a statement of work, create a change management process, and create a governance structure and document whatever, creating any training necessary for this. So that's the architect role. Now, I want to make it clear, we don't touch technology. It's not part of our job. I mean, sure, you'll write Word documents, PowerPoint documents. Yes, you'll probably make a graphic and say Visio or PowerPoint or Lucidchart or Draw.io, but we don't ever touch the client's technology. We don't implement it. So that's the job. So you're going to need these skills. And these skills include things like sales skills, because you'll always be selling your architecture, communication skills, because you're going to be the person who's going to get the information back and forth. You're going to need presentation skills, because we give presentations almost every day as architects. And the last part of an interview for an architect is a presentation. You're going to have executive writing skills, the ability to write for executives. Now listen carefully: sales skills, communication skills, presentation skills. There's a reason I'm saying these things. Now, we're going to go into the tech skills too, but you'll also need executive writing skills, and you'll need leadership skills. You'll need to have executive presence, and I'll turn mine off. Hi, everybody. My name's Mike. Now, I had a lot of extensive training in executive presence, but you have to be able to walk in, command the room, and be felt as powerful, because you're going to be guiding people on potentially billion-dollar architectures, and you have to sell that to them, and you're not credible without executive presence. You'll also need to know what's called CXO relevancy, because you'll have to be able to communicate with the C-suite. And you're going to have a big understanding of business, because the whole reason architects exist is to design a strategy where the technology is going to improve that client's business performance. But if you don't understand business, you can't do any of it. And then you'll need negotiation skills. And of course, you'll know how to be able to build a business case, because we architects do that all the time. Now, I'll bring it back to the tech so I don't miss anything. You will need technical design skills in networking. Things like BGP, routing, wide area network, for example, and things like that you'll need to know about. You'll need to understand servers and server compute, like things like servers and server virtualization and containers and function as a service and application virtualization. You'll need to understand load balancing, whether it be via load balancers or DNS or a network load balancer, an application load balancer, or reverse proxy, forward proxy. You'll need to understand various kinds of storage. You'll need to understand security to a degree, application security, for example, network security, IAM security, and disaster recovery planning, business recovery planning, physical security, and there's a lot more that's going to go into that. And of course, and all the architectural tools to solve that. And of course, you're also going to have to know multi-cloud design, because everybody's multi-cloud. So those are the things we do. So given that you will never touch the technology as an architect, when someone tries to show me their GitHub repository, I say, I'm sorry, you must be confusing architecture with engineering. And you have no idea the number of people that tried to show me that they made a website and they wanted to be an architect. And I said, that's great. You proved to me you know nothing about architecture. And they say, what do you mean? And I said, if you're trying to show me that building a website means you know how to create a strategy to enhance business performance, it means you don't know what an architect is. So what does that now mean, Adam? 1, 2, 3. Well, if communication skills, presentation skills, sales skills, and executive writing skills and leadership skills are going to be so important, what do you actually have to do? Now, when you realize an architect doesn't, what they do is they create architectures. They create potentially reference architectures for various types of environment. Architects create business cases. Architects create thought leadership. For example, some new type of technology may solve various problems and write about how that does. We do that all the time as architects. As architects, we give presentations. So if you want to show you have architect experience, prove you can sell. Design reference architectures and put some research into them, a month or two of research, because a real architecture could take 6 to 12 months with 15 people. So if you're going to create an architecture or reference architecture, make it great so people actually want to see it. So deal with that. You know, we respond to RFIs, RFPs, RFQs as an architect, but think about that. Create architectures, create solutions, create strategies, and talk about it. Go present at conferences. Go create video content that shows you're an expert. But if you can't create good video content, get the training and the coaching before you do. Because if you create bad video content, it's going to be the same thing as it's going to be worse than no content, because it's just going to say, I don't have the skills. Don't hire me. But do that. Put good content in the world and show the world you know something. But some things can be learned and some things really need to be taught. I'll give you an example of things that can be learned. You can learn how to administer Linux. You can learn how to administer Windows easily, because the more time you play with it, the better you're going to learn. You can't learn how to do surgery. I mean, you go to medical school, you learn anatomy, then you do, after medical school, you do a residency, and someone actually does it with you every day for years, at least until you're good, and you watch and you follow and you learn. So, the surgeon's first job is a surgeon, but you can't go figure that out yourself. You have to be taught. Because if you just start cutting people open, they're not going to live. You can't teach yourself how to fly a plane either, because you'll crash probably before you learn how to do it. You need to be taught. Now, architecture is one of those things you typically can't pick up on your own. You have to be taught, because it's not the way normal people think. Normal people think about what's in front of them. And architecture is almost never about what's in front of you. Architecture is about, if I make this change, what are the 10 things that impacts along the way? If we make this change, what are the 15 things that it impacts along the way? If we make this thing, it's going to impact these other 10 things. So after evaluating all trade-offs, what's going to be the best for the business, which I understand it means you need to understand business. So I hope that helps. content that looks similar like architect work, or take a course like ours where we'll not only teach you architecture, but we'll actually put you through all the things, and you'll have things to talk about. For example, I've had students that co-authored books with us in cloud architecture. I periodically co-author papers occasionally with people, and I have students that go out there and create these types of contents, and people come to them all the time, but they need to know what kind of content to create. So Adam 123, I hope that helps. You're a SaaS implementation project manager, passed the Google Digital Cloud Leader Foundational Cert, but you're stuck on getting networking skills and design skills. Any suggestions? So I need to know your goals. All you told me about is your past job and that you took an exam. And you think you're stuck on networking and design skills, but what job are you actually looking for? Because I want to gauge that first. Because if your goal is engineering, you'll need a different set of networking skills, for example. If your goal is to be an architect, you'll need something entirely different. Completely different skills for each of these jobs. If your goal is to be a network architect, well, you're going to need a special set of networking skills. If your goal is to be a cloud architect, you'll need to know some networking, but nowhere near as much as a network architect. So let me know what you're really looking to do. Is the Solution Architect program able to help you get the AWS Solutions Architect, but also experience through projects? So if you're referring to our Cloud Architect program, passing the cloud, well, there's two things. Passing the AWS certification is going to be super easy. And Raphael, if your only goal is to pass the AWS Solutions Architect exam, there's a free Solution Architect training program on our YouTube channel for the AWS certification. But let's talk about the difference between the AWS certification and the Solutions Architect job. Now, I have a program called the Cloud Architect Career Development Program, and I have people that are already AWS certified come to me, or they have no certification background. It doesn't matter to me. Or they've been a cloud engineer for 10 years, or they were a sales rep like Al, who went from sales rep and left our organization and joined Deloitte as a senior solutions architect. So that will give you the real architectural projects. Real architecture projects in our Cloud Architect Career Development Program will be designing architectures, presenting those architectures to a C-suite audience, responding to an RFI, RFP, and RFQ. My students do it all the time. Designing private clouds, hybrid multi-cloud solutions, designing AI solutions to optimize business performance. My students are doing this kind of stuff all the time. Designing architectures for big banks that have certain challenges like trading systems. Designing architectures on how you would create video solutions. My students do all of that because we create an internship in that program. It's an internship with training that actually occurs along the way. And my people stay in that program until they're hired. So if you're asking about our Cloud Architect Career Development Program, that'll get you everything you need. And the reality is it's only going to be 1 or 2 days pay for the average graduate, because we keep our costs basically close to our costs, or almost our costs exactly. And that way we can create the next generation of leaders, because thankfully I had an incredible architect career, and this is my retirement fund thing to do, getting people hired, and it happens all the time, and I love it. So I kind of hope that helps. There's a difference between a certification that you need, and there's a big difference between a certification, for example, and what you need to learn as an architect. So I hope I answered your question. And you can learn a lot more tomorrow at 11 a.m. And for anyone, whether you're interested in our training or not, we'll actually cover over everything we do in the job, and we'll talk about what employers want in the job and how to bypass HR. For example, if it's your first time and you don't have experience and you don't want to get auto-rejected, we'll do this. We do this pretty much every week. Tomorrow's on how to become a security architect webinar, but if you've got cloud architecture questions, I'll answer them too. And I can also assess you and assess your readiness. Your goal is Cloud Architect B-Belly. So I think that's great. So your SaaS implementation project, and any suggestions. So B-Belly, I'm going to ask you a couple questions, and please answer if you could answer them. So I might ask you that an organization has a weighted average cost of capital, and you may not be able to answer these things, but I want to assess your readiness for you. And if you can't answer it, it's okay. So, because it's not Zoom where it's going to be easy, but if I were to ask you and say that an organization has a weighted average cost of capital of 7.2%, how would you use that information to determine if you should build this client an OpenStack or Nutanix private cloud versus using a public cloud? Would you be able to answer it? And if you can't, that's a business acumen issue, which we would need to fix. Now, the next thing I might ask you is, since you say networking is your weakness, I would say, could you tell me the difference between context aware IAM versus attribute-based access control versus role-based access control, and explain it to me? If you can't, you probably have some IAM weaknesses. Now, if I were to ask you, how would you scale a relational database? Could you answer it? If I asked you, of your database options, which ones are best for multi-cloud where you can write all nodes at the same time, would Apache Cassandra typically pop up in your head because it goes on all clouds and it writes to all nodes? Would that be one of those things you would just immediately think about? Now, networking skills would be weak if I say, what type of wide area network would you use to connect to the cloud and why? Where I would expect someone to talk about the difference between an IPsec tunnel and a private line versus a software-defined WAN versus a SASE WAN. So these are all the things that go into architecture. And as a rule, from my experience, and I work with a lot of project managers. Gladys, for example, was a project manager. We trained her and she became an architect. Alonzo was a project manager. We trained him. He got a job on the cloud, and I pulled him off and asked him to come back because we liked working with him so much. I've got a lot of track record of project managers, but the Google Digital Cloud Leader is not going to really help you in architecture at all, because it's not going to teach you how do you go from a business problem to create a strategy. So that's what I would think. So my suggestion is to kind of come to the webinar tomorrow, and I can give you an assessment there, and I can see if networking is the issue. Because if networking is the issue, maybe all you need is the free CCNA on our channel and the free BGP on our channel and training on our channel and the free IP subnetting thing on our channel, and you're good to go. Now, if that's not the case, I'll recommend other training, but I can gauge you that and test you on Zoom. But those would be the kind of things that I would think about, because usually when I've got someone in engineering for about 10 years and they don't realize that they need a new crossover, that there's changing careers to be an architect, they don't understand architecture and engineering are different until you had the role. The architect is the role that when I got my first architect job, and I thought it was going to be a technical role, and I went, wait, what? This is like almost not technical. And I missed the tech. I really did in the beginning. Later, I realized the more business acumen, the better I would do. So I did that and learned more business acumen and absolutely loved it. So hope that helps. But join us tomorrow and we'll get you to your goals no matter what. We can tell you exactly what you need to do. Chris, let's go to the next one. And please bring some questions. We really do want to help. You're so welcome. And I'm so glad you asked the question. Rafael Riviera, can you specialize in both cloud architect and security architect, or do you recommend one of them? So now, Rafael, when I train security architects, what I do is I make sure the only way that I can do it and make sure that my architects are great is I can train them in security, and that's my main focus. But if you don't understand the network and you don't understand the data center and you don't understand the cloud, you won't be able to do anything. Because if you don't know what you're securing, you can't secure it. So what I do is I take my students in our security architect program, I put them in 2 days of cloud architecture training, because our cloud architecture training was also so heavily security based that we had people like R, and I can't say his name because he's working in a top secret environment, but he had a major security architect job. It was his first tech job, and it was in the CISO's office. That was his first role. I can tell you that Delroy Batt was driving ambulances. He was an EMT before he met us. And then after our training, he worked at CDW as a security architect. He worked in another great company as a security architect as well. So and that was from just our cloud program. So by doing so, I put my security architects in our cloud architect training program 2 days a week, and I put them in our security architect program 1 day a week with very deep security content. And then they do another day per week of executive training and leadership training, and that's part of our security architect program. But I recommend picking one, because if you're going to be an expert, It's going to take you focusing your life on one thing. Now, the cloud architect, by its very definition, is a non-expert position. It is a generalist position. And here's what I mean. So normally if people are sick, they go to the general practitioner or family doctor and they say, oh, well, you know what? I want you to go see the cardiologist for this. I want you to see the neurologist for this. I want you to see endocrinologist for this. I want you to see the orthopedic surgeon. And they're the center that owns the client relationship or the patient relationship, and they get other people as needed. That's the nature of the cloud architect job, because you're going to be designing systems on 3 clouds at the same time, most likely. And because 98% of enterprises are multi-cloud, and even small business and medium business, 89% of them are multi-cloud. So everybody's multi-cloud. So if you're in a cloud architect role, how deep can you truly get if you have to have security under you and networking under you and IAM under you, which is different than security, and big data under you and AI under you and every other crazy thing known to man? Now, an enterprise may have 1,000 different applications going on, just to put it into context, and petabytes of data. So you need a team. Now, when you're the cloud architect, you bring specialty architects like security architects with you. If you are a security architect, what I would then recommend is focusing more on the security side, because you need to be the go-to expert in security. Now, can you be a cloud architect with a whole lot of knowledge in security? That's me, a cloud architect with a whole lot of knowledge in networking and security, because I was one of the first CCIEs and actually been in security since 2003. And prior to that, I was involved in other physical security type things and emergency response type things. So security's been my life for decades now. But I'd recommend specializing in one. And if, for example, an Olympic gymnast specializes in gymnastics. They don't go swimming. They don't go hiking. It's gymnastics. An Olympic runner focuses on running, especially a distance runner. And that's what they do. Now, if you're dealing with a sprinter, they need different training because they're a power athlete. So they run hard and fast, but they use weights. So it's all more about that. So be an expert at whatever you pick. And that way, Raphael, you'll really do well. The expert always stands out, and it takes 10,000 hours in just one area to be an expert. And I always talk about the CCIE. I love the CCIE because the CCIE was my intro to networking. And believe me, it was a hard intro. I had to read 75,000 pages of material, spend about 1,000 hours in the labs, which really didn't help me much, but it taught me how to pass the lab. But it was a good 75,000 pages of reading. And that was for routing and switching. That's not even all of networking. They had other people. They had a CCIE in wireless. They had a CCIE in security. They had a CCIE in voice. And all of this were all in the networking domain. And you'd spend your life mastering one of them. That's how you get paid more. You become great at one thing. So much better than your competition. Hope that helps. Follow up. What certifications would I recommend for someone aspiring to be a cloud architect? So the key to know here, Adam123, is that there are 0 certifications that teach architecture except the Cisco Certified Design Expert exam. That is a true architecture exam, and that they give you a challenging situation. You have to create the design and the architecture. You have to present the architecture to the client, and then they interrogate you with questions on the architecture. So the CCDE teaches architecture. Now, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional is the name of an AWS service, which is a marketing term. And how do you configure those services? That's it. It has nothing to do with architecture. So if you had 13 AWS certifications, chances are, and I've interviewed people, you may not even know what cloud computing is. And I'm not joking, because what is an AWS certification? Wow, this is Elastic Compute Cloud. This is Amazon Simple Storage Solution. But they didn't tell you that the EC2 instance was the standard virtual machine that's no different than any other virtual machine since 1999 from VMware. It's identical. It's just it's their hypervisor versus someone else. And they don't want to tell you that, look, it's the same storage you had in the data center, because they don't want to say that, but now it costs more in the cloud. So we have to understand the difference between knowing architecture, being able to take in all the information and solve problems, versus a certification. Having said that, the AWS Solutions Architect Professional will get you an interview, but you'll never pass the interview with what's in it. I actually now do the CISSP certification for all my cloud architecture students and every architecture student right now, because there are no architecture certifications, and the CISSP is so highly respected as an architecture certification. I've been training my students in that now in all of our programs, and I got to tell you, that's increased the number of interviews they get dramatically, and it's helped a lot of my students get hired. Now, I will also tell you that I'm now recommending TOGAF 10. And the reason I'm recommending TOGAF 10 is employers have interviewed thousands of AWS certified people now, and they realize that most of them don't even know what is cloud computing. So now they're looking for something extra to kind of bolster things. And that's where I'm using TOGAF 10. Plus, TOGAF 10 teaches an architecture framework. And it teaches you to start with the business goals and then evaluate the business architecture and then evaluate the data applications and technology and make changes to it and make sure you create a governance structure. And the way it does, it's in a logical order to make sure you don't create an architecture that doesn't solve any business problems. And sadly, 70 to 80% of all technology projects all hurt the company because they cost a fortune and they do nothing for the business. So you've got to be great. So those would be the certifications that I would do. Just make sure that somehow you learn architecture, because you won't learn them in there. TOGAF will tell you the steps that you should do things, but it won't teach you how to do those things. And that's why I created what I did, because I had to get architects hired. But those three certifications, TOGAF, CISSP, and the AWS Solutions Architect Professional or the Azure Solutions Architect Expert, they will get you interviews. And then it's up to your training and your skills and your knowledge to get hired. And like most companies have migrated to the cloud or are cloud native, will they need architects if they are already in the cloud? Will DevOps security engineers be needed more? So here's the reality. You can assume that many of these engineering people are going to be removed by AI coming soon. Security engineers are safe. And the reason security engineers are safe is there is a massive shortage in cybersecurity. Anything related to development or coding is not safe. So keep that in the back of your mind. Now, here's the thing, Claude, many of the organizations went to the cloud and they went, oh, wait, this is a problem. So now they're all leaving the cloud and they're going back to their private cloud. Now, we cloud architects are designing that. How big is cloud repatriation? At least 50% of the companies are considering leaving or moving more of some of their stuff out of the cloud. Now, who knows how to do this? A cloud architect. Now, the other thing we cloud architects are doing is we have to go re-architect all of these cloud architectures. And why? Because 70 to 80% of them provided no business benefit, zero, which meant they hurt the business. And why was it? Because they had a bunch of engineering-oriented people try to architect something, and they didn't know architecture, they knew engineering. So they didn't map out the business processes, they didn't understand the business architecture, they just picked what they thought was cool technology in a completely unrelated way to the business. So there's that. So, there's a lot of work for architects to do. Now, Claude, I want you to think about the business side. Now, pretend for a second you're the CEO of a company and you have two sets of people that make you money and people that cost you money. Engineers cost you money. They don't make you anything. They're an expense. Now, most architects are in one of two roles. We're working at a Cisco, an IBM, a Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini, PricewaterhouseCoopers kind of company. And here, the architect is going to the client, they're selling a solution, and they're bringing in revenue to the company, meaning they make money. Now, the engineers, where they write their code, doesn't matter if it's in Cameroon, Cambodia, Chicago, California. But I'll tell you what, from an economics perspective, it costs a whole lot less to live in Cameroon than it does in California. And a company can pay someone in Cameroon a wage, which would be a quarter of what they would pay in California. And the person in Cameroon will be rich, meaning they'll be able to pay for their house that year in cash and then some. So it is all about, when it comes to engineering, it doesn't matter where you're at. Now, as an architect, I've got to meet the C-suite. I've got to give presentations at conferences. I've got to go sell. And I've personally closed $1 billion deals where we brought in $1 billion into the company. Now, whatever they want to pay me, I can't ask for enough. It doesn't matter because of the amount of revenue I'm bringing in. So architects are revenue generating, engineers are revenue costing. And that's why you'll see all these companies, what they've been doing is laying off their engineers. And then a week later, hiring solutions architects and hiring sales engineers, but they got rid of back-end developers and they got rid of back engineering. So security engineers are safe. Cloud engineers, DevOps engineers, cloud, there's a reason we stopped selling our cloud engineering program 2 years ago. And you can see I've been published in every major magazine known to man, and you can check it out on our website. I stopped selling cloud engineering programs because I knew AI in the future will take 50, 80, 90% of these jobs away. And I don't want to train people for careers of the past. Lots of opportunities in architecture. Every new technology that's created creates new architect jobs. Why is that? Okay, so now we're looking at generative AI. We're looking at AI for predictive analysis, for example. We're looking at agentic AI. Now every company says, "Ooh, we have an opportunity to improve our business performance. Let's bring in an AI architect to figure out these AI strategies for us." So all in all, every new technology creates an architect job, an architect job, an architect job. Now, the same technology that's creating these, that demands the need for increased architects to sell and lead, is crushing our engineers. So Claude, it's up to you. If you're going to stay in engineering and you want to be in engineering, what I can tell you is this: make sure you get a lot of architect skills, meaning the ability to give a great presentation, the ability to sell, the ability to really understand business, very good soft skills, because you may find that the only opportunities in your company are going to be sales engineers. And that's great because you can use your engineering experience and then add some skills and business skills and earn double anyway and have a much easier job. But always think about where the revenue is coming from and where the expenses are. And when it gets to be a tough economy, don't be on the expense side, be on the revenue producing side. And like I said, I've written articles for every major publication. I've been in Forbes, I've been in CIO magazine and everywhere, Investors Business Daily, and I always give advice on to move to customer facing roles. IBM did it. We're laying off all of these people, but not customer facing roles, because the tech and the AI could do those back end roles. And even Mark Zuckerberg said, he said, this year we're going to get rid of the bottom engineers because AI is better than they are. So we have to understand there's all levels of engineers and all levels of people and all capabilities. We will always need the best engineers, the ones that have deep analysis and incredible knowledge and planning and optimization and tuning. But anybody that's related to an admin role, I wouldn't train for that. I've told people to stop training for those roles for years because there'll be a tremendous amount of competition and almost no need. So ton of supply and almost no demand. So keep that in the back of your mind. Lots of progress. And Claude, the other way I want you to think about architecture is understand that as soon as you're done one architecture, the company is going to say, wow, interest rates just changed, or there's tariffs or something. No, that's going to force the business to change its architecture, which is going to force the business to change its technology systems. So it's not just move it to the cloud, it's done. It's move it to the cloud and go, wait, we shouldn't have moved this workload. Well, this workload was heavy-duty compute, and we bought a $300,000 server from Dell, but we moved it to the cloud, and it cost us $5 million for this one server. Well, maybe let's move these 100 servers back to the data center. Now, all this event-driven stuff on the cloud, that looks kind of cool. All this agility on the cloud, that looks kind of cool, and use the cloud strategically. So I kind of hope that helps, Claude. Can I highlight the differences between cloud architecture and system design? Absolutely. System design is typically an engineer that sits in the basement with a couple engineers and they focus on technology. Architecture is the alignment of people, processes, and technology. Where you go to the executives and you find out what their needs are, where they want to take the business, what are the business challenges, and where they're wanting to go. Architecture is about understanding the business process and working with the organizations to find a better way for people to do things. And then architecture is thinking about what is the most strategic approach to do things. What are the impacts? If I change this, what is the impact to this? If I change this, what is the impact to this part of the system? And then being able to evaluate all the technology from all the vendors and being able to do it in a manner that you create the best strategy for your client. Where it's not, ooh, this is the coolest technology. It's, well, the business has this need. And for some reason, the mainframe is going to be the best solution to this. So let's use a mainframe. And mainframe spending is going up, by the way, because there are certain things that mainframes do so well. Now, the people that have a religion or a bias towards a certain kind of technology, we have to get rid of them. Imagine a doctor that said, oh, I could give you these drugs. They're made by Pfizer, and I love Pfizer drugs, and I love Pfizer. Here's a Pfizer drug. Could you trust that person? Or would you trust the physician where you walk in and they say, well, you need this surgical procedure. This is the best surgeon for that. You know what? You've got a sinus infection. I'm going to give you this antibiotic because right now this antibiotic is going to be best at killing this bacteria, which is the bacteria that's circulating in 90% of sinus infections right now. Which would you like? That's what I want. I don't want the person that's excited about a thing. So that's architecture. Architecture is a business role. I like to say it's 2/3 business and 1/3 tech. And if you speak to David Lithicum, who's an incredible cloud architect, he was basically Deloitte's chief cloud architect. He's like, my cloud architecture, you know it. It's 75% business and 25% tech. And David's right. I agree with him. But I got to give people 1/3 because they don't believe me how non-technical the role is. But it is a non-technical role. It's facilitating meetings, it's writing documents, it's giving presentations, it's bringing the best out of the technical teams and bringing them lunches and dinners and drinks and all kinds of coordination, facilitation, managing stakeholders, managing vendors. That's architecture. Good question. Very good question, Ice Cream. Hi, Mike. You were thinking of pursuing an internal solution architect role at Microsoft. How would you propose vendor neutral solutions and a vendor SA role? Well, I've definitely been in that role. And I'll tell you why I've definitely been in this role. So I was a solutions architect. First job was a principal solutions architect at Riverstone. I had less than 2 years experience at the time. Then I had a solutions architect job at Cisco for a little while before I moved into executive architect roles. Now, I have to tell you, when you work for a company, you have to recommend their things. But you can do it in an open and honest and an ethical way. So if you recommend a security solution, maybe there is a Microsoft piece that you do recommend, or 2 parts of Microsoft. But maybe you go out there and say, I can't recommend our WAF solution because it doesn't have behavioral anomaly detection. So, Mr. or Mrs. Enterprise customer, we recommend your demilitarized zones look like this. Now, here's the reality, Dingleman, and I know you. The customer wouldn't let you actually use those WAFs anyway, even if you tried to push it, because they'd say, huh? Seriously? Do you value our business? Do you value us as a client? So we have to think there. Now, Microsoft is going to be different than maybe other cloud providers because Microsoft does a lot of work. It's not just cloud stuff they have. They've got their operating systems. They've got their Office products, for example, their productivity suites. They're in the video gaming business. So when you're in a conglomerate like Microsoft, you can't be overly pushy on one thing that you don't think is best for your client because you'll lose all the other business if you lose your trusted advisor status. So at Microsoft, you're going to be more likely to be left alone and to be more free. And when you start thinking Microsoft, you start thinking big enterprise because that's really their focus. And Microsoft's focus is on digital transformation. So at Microsoft, you should be pretty good. At other organizations, it might be a little bit different. Microsoft is pretty ethical. IBM was always fairly ethical in these dealings. Cisco was incredibly ethical in these places and these kind of dealings. And they'll let you use things that aren't theirs. Now, there'll always be a preference to use theirs, but they can't lose the trust of their audience. So you'll still be able to use non-Microsoft things. And what you'll see is certain things are great. You know, all these providers have their own log aggregation services, but you might want to use Splunk from Cisco, for example, across all your clouds, and you probably will. Now, when it comes to firewalls, Palo Alto, Checkpoint, Fortinet, Cisco, that's all your choices, realistically speaking, are going to be in any kind of major enterprise security for the most part. That's the majority of your market share, and they'll have you do that. But you know what? Microsoft does have some good security projects. products. And Microsoft does have a lot of IAM products and other things which are very well fit into the enterprise. So recommend what's great. And for the things that you don't feel are there, try to recommend other solutions. I always walk that fine line. And I can tell you how effective that fine line is. I had a client in Dubai, and I remember because it was 2002, it was right before I joined Cisco. And this client in Dubai I met them and we just instantly clicked. I mean, completely clicked. The customer had a lot of problems before I got there. I went there. I was able to solve their IP multicast video problems. I got lucky, truthfully, because they had a lot of great engineers that tried to solve it before me. I managed to solve it. Everybody was happy. And after I solved the problem, even though I was there as an architect and I was really, my goal there was to keep calling back into support and get them to write the right code or whatever. I was sort of there, and it was more of a technical architect in those days than a real architect, but I didn't know better because it was new to my architecture career. I'd only been in architecture about a year and a half at the time. And I can tell you, people were, when I went there, I was like, you know what? I don't know what happened. I think we got it fixed. I'm going to stay here a week. And by the way, the week in Dubai was really beautiful. I loved it. So I spent the week in Dubai and I went back. And you know what happened? A month later, Mike, we're interested in more product. I know you're not the sales rep, but can we talk to you? I went in there. We sat down. They bought a lot of product. I stayed another week or two, got to learn their business. Same thing happened a couple months later, and then a couple months later. So I had about a year and a quarter's relationship with this client. They were really decent, really wonderful people. I loved working with them. And the client says to me, Cisco's got a switch that looks right now a little better than the one we're getting from you, Mike, at Riverstone. What do you think about that switch? And I said, truthfully, that Cisco switch is a little better than ours. It's the same price. It's got about 20% better performance, and I can't say anything negative about that Cisco switch. And I can't tell you, and I won't tell you that you shouldn't buy it. You know what the response was? That was what we were expecting you to say, Mike. So here's your next purchase order. And it was because they trusted me so much, and what they literally said is, Mike, we could buy it from them, but they don't have you. That hit me, how important it was to have a good name. And that was 2002, and I've always acted that way. I come from medicine. I'm a nurse practitioner. I practiced internal medicine for a while, so I can't ethically, I just feel I can't give people what's not in their best interest, and they felt it and they know it. And that's what I would say. You'll have plenty of opportunities to deal with Microsoft products that are in the right place. Plenty. For the solution architect role, should you focus more on soft skills or technical skills? Well, it's going to be 3/4 business skills and 1/4 tech skills. So the way these companies have solutions architects, and let me kind of explain it to you. So companies have sales reps that are paid commission to go sell stuff. And sales reps are great, but what would you do if you're paid commission to sell stuff? You'll sell anything, right? And the key is the sales reps are good business people. They've got great presentation skills, lots of business acumen, lots of leadership, lots of executive presence, and so many other good skills. But they don't understand the technology, generally speaking, the people that are selling it. So what you typically see is an account executive and either a sales engineer or a solutions architect, and they go out together. The sales engineer helps get the business requirements and all these things, and you go with them and open doors and open relationships until you have your own. And then the solutions architect comes back and creates an architecture team and leads the design. And then they go back and forth, the account executive and the solutions architect, back and forth presentations until ultimately the solutions architect helps sell it. Lots of presentations, RFI, RFP responses. So that's really the role. And if you're a really good solutions architect, you will not be touching the technology, because the second you do, you lose focus on your business goals, or you lose focus of the big picture. And the next thing you realize, you miss something and then you're getting fired. So, that's why you see the people that try to be too techy, they don't do well, because what happens is when you focus on the tech, you don't actually focus on the strategy. So it's predominantly business. You're going to have to give presentations. You're going to have to sell. You're going to have to create thought leaderships. You're going to have to be presenting an executive briefing, presenting at conferences. So the last part of the interview is even a presentation. You're going to have to lead an architecture team. You're going to have to manage stakeholders. You're going to have to manage vendors. But you still need the technical skills. Now, the technical skills are not how to. They're how would you design or how would you architect. So I kind of hope that makes sense. You need both. For example, you would need to know, well, what wide area network technology would you use to connect to the cloud? What kind of routing protocol would you use? Why would you use those kind of routing protocols? How do you secure your connections to the cloud? You definitely need to understand those. How do you protect yourself if you're in a multi-cloud situation? If you're connected to AWS, Azure, and Google, how do you protect yourself from the hacking attacks that have happened on Microsoft from not attacking your Google Cloud, AWS Cloud, and your Nutanix Cloud? So you have to have the technical depth. Raphael, why don't you join us tomorrow on the How to Become a Security Architect webinar, and I can also address them, and it's going to be free and it's going to be live. Great question. Please feel free to ask them. Do I think FinOps roles will start booming? No. And can I describe what a cloud consultant does? So a cloud consultant is a meaningless term. It could be an architect. It could be an anything. It could be a sales rep. It could be anything. So here's the thing. Here's why FinOps is not going to ever solve the problem. Do I think FinOps roles will get there? No. And I'll tell you why they will grow a little bit, but why it's architecture. So the reason we have all these cloud cost problems is because most people that moved to the cloud initially, when we had no cloud architects, were people that were just certified. Because, 15 years ago, nobody knew what to hire, so somebody got a certification and they hired them. Now, if you look in the certifications, they're very clear. Now, what if I told you that nobody in any certification ever told you that the cloud was just renting space in someone else's data center? That's all it is. And everything in the cloud provider has, whether it be containers, whether it be virtual machines, whether it be block storage, object storage, or file storage, whether it be network load balancers, application load balancers, whether it be databases, it was all in the data center. And what do we have in the cloud? A virtual data center, which by default performs slightly less. Now, the problem was not my moving to the cloud, which is where we need FinOps. The problem is people didn't do the math before they went to the cloud. Here's the math, Claude. I can go right now to the Dell website and I can buy a server with AMD Gen 5 EPYC CPUs. I can pack that thing with about 6 gigs or 6 terabytes of DRAM, and I can pack 384 physical cores or 768 virtual cores. Now that server is going to cost me $300, $350. Now on the cloud, that server over the course of 4 years is going to cost me $7 million, $5 to $7 million. Now take 1,000 of those servers. It's crazy what the cloud is charging. Now, what's the problem? The problem is that virtual machine that was sitting there in the data center should have stayed there. It would be 5-10 times cheaper. So a bunch of people that didn't understand architecture just moved the stuff over to the cloud. And now FinOps is like, well, this is how much it sends. So the cure is not FinOps. The cure is have the architect re-architect the solution and take the stuff that should never be in the cloud out of the cloud, create the proper architecture, and then have FinOps to try to keep track of the money. So if you can look at it, you can look at it as FinOps is after the fact. So Claude, I want you to think about this. Which do you think would be better? A doctor to prevent someone from having a heart attack by giving them the right medication and building them the right plan, diet, exercise, medication. Or Claude, the other alternative is just don't think about it. Let the person have a heart attack. And when they're in the hospital, then we'll do the open heart surgery to fix it, the cardio RNA bypass graft. Now, that's what FinOps is. FinOps is saying, well, the patient's already sick, so let's go fix them. Here's what architecture is. Well, the architectural investments we've made aren't working, so let's take these out of the cloud. Now, these two applications that are in the cloud are really working for us. Let's keep it here. That's architecture. So because it was bad architecture that brought people to the cloud, basically it's going to be good architecture that's going to remove some of the services from the cloud that never would have been there and then there. So FinOps, I do think it will grow, but nobody's going to be excited about FinOps. FinOps is another back-end job. Who earns more? The finance people that help an organization make more money, or the accounting people that count what money people spend. So FinOps, like every other back-end role, will tend to be very low paying compared to the architecture role. It will tend to be low respect because now it's about saving money. And Claude, what really matters is how the system is done. Let's say I've got an organization that has $20 billion in sales. And as an architect, after understanding the business strategy and everything that's needed, we can create an AI recommendation engine that may cost $10 million. And in addition to the $10 million AI recommendation engine, we do a revamp of the website and the customer experience. Now, what if that brings $50 million of sales or $100 million of sales annually and only cost us it only cost us $20 million? That's what finance people do. Invest in this option because it has a greater return on investment than this option. And that's why the finance people are always the highest paid, because they're making people money. Now, we all have an accountant. At the end of the year, I give the accountant every receipt and say, you figure out what to do with it. And that's great. I pay that person, but I'll tell you, that person, the accountant, is much less paid than the finance professional. They can make somebody millions and millions and millions of dollars. So yes, I do think it'll be there because somebody has to help clean up the mess, but it's going to be architecture that fixes it, not FinOps. And you can see David and Lithicum and I have actually had many conversations about that on this channel. And David's got about 35 years architecture experience. I only have 25, but so you can hear it from both of us there. Good question. Would you advise an MBA to focus on cloud architect or security architect? I would actually advise an MBA to focus on being an enterprise architect. So why? Why would I say enterprise architect for the MBA? And let me map it out for you. And I train plenty of enterprise architects too. So if you look at, let me bear with me, I'm going to create a little whiteboard here. So if we look at the top role in any technology officer, it's this. It's the Chief Information Officer. And what is the Chief Information Officer? They are architecting the business to be more efficient based on technology. It's about aligning people, processes, and technology. So that's what the CIO does. Now, what does the enterprise architect do? The enterprise architect is all about aligning people, processes, and technology. Wait, the CIO is about aligning people, processes, and technology, and the enterprise architect is about aligning people, processes, and technology. So the enterprise architect is going to be the easiest way to the chief architect role, or the chief, which is also an enterprise architect role, the chief technology officer, which is also an enterprise architect role, and a CIO. And where does that fit in? All that stuff is MBA stuff or better, because now we're spending a lot. Before, we're presenting to executives in a cloud architect role, but in an enterprise architect role, we're presenting to the board. We have much more frequent conversations with the CEO. And then underneath the enterprise architect, we typically have the cloud architects that are designing the multi-cloud solution. So then we would have the cloud architect, at least if it was in a cloud environment. And then underneath the cloud architects, we would have the specialty architects, like a network architect or a security architect. Now, as we go, that was a network architect. As we go from, and security is a bit of an exception, but as we go from more technical to more business, to complete business, our salaries can go up hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. The enterprise architect role is an MBA role. The cloud architect is also an MBA role, but if you were to look at the cloud architect role as 2/3 technology, or I'm sorry, 2/3 business, 1/3 technology, the enterprise architect is an 85 to 95% business and very little in technology. And here's where your highest incomes are typically going to be coming. Here's where your $800,000 or more chief architect jobs are, and it's in this range. So all these roles are good, but what do you love? That's what matters. I hope that explains. Bear with me. I moved my streaming window to another monitor I have now. I'm back. But to be able to draw that for you. But I hope that makes sense. Okay, Chris. For an MBA transition in the cloud, what would you recommend focus on between cloud architect versus security architect? And which one will be in demand? So business acumen is going to be critical in either one of these roles, and both of these roles are in demand. Now, security right now, remember I said on the pay, and I said the security architect, and quite frankly, the AI architect, and that's why we run those specialty programs, actually tend to earn more, and they don't fall within that reason. And that's because they fall on the perfect point on the supply and demand curve. Meaning the demand for security people is so high globally. There's, I think, a 5.3 million person shortage. There's 750,000 open security positions. So that tends to be very good. It really, really tends to be very, very good because of that supply and demand curve. But with the MBA, I still think if I was you, I'd go straight to the enterprise architect role. And that's where I would focus. And if you train with us, what we do is train you to be a cloud architect and enterprise architect in the same program. And here's the reason why I do that. Most of the enterprise architects that I worked with in my life had no idea what any of the technology was they were actually working on. They were just such good MBA business executives. So what I actually did is I have enterprise architecture training and cloud architecture training, and I mix it. And the reason I mix it, if it's someone's first tech job, maybe the first job they end up getting is a cloud architect or a solutions architect. And even if they took that for a year or two as their first tech job, I view that as a win because that solution architect is a fairly entry-level role compared to the rest of them. And then move into an enterprise architect with a couple of years. Or you could be people like Wallace, whose first job was an enterprise architect, and it was his first tech job. Or Jermaine, who sold landscaping gear, whose first tech job was an enterprise architect. And then again, I've got other people like Pritapal, who had 20 years of engineering. And we took him from engineering and trained him to be an enterprise architect, and now he's working as an enterprise architect. So I'd probably go enterprise architect if I was you because of the MBA. And we could use that MBA heavily in the enterprise architecture role to show more business acumen, but it'll be beneficial in any. So it's more a matter of do what you love. iPhone, most solutions architect roles are sales-based. That's what most solutions architects are. Now, if you think about it, the solution architect job, why is it sales-based? Because a solution architect only is dealing with a single vendor's technology. Now, no real business is going to just run on AWS. I mean, you might think that if you're 13x AWS certified, but if you get to the real world, you'll see hundreds of vendors. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 vendors. Everybody's technology projects. So the solution architect is almost always a sales role. And here's the reason why. A solution architect designs, presents, and sells the technology. Now, if you got a role as a cloud architect, you'd be working for the client. And since no client deals with a single vendor, they hire cloud architects. So solutions architects are almost exclusively going to be sold. So you work at a Cisco at a solution architect, you design, present, and sell Cisco solutions. You work as a solutions architect at NVIDIA, you design, present, and sell NVIDIA solutions. You work as a solutions architect at IBM, you design, present, and sell IBM solutions. Solutions architect at AWS, design, and present, and sell AWS stuff. So I kind of hope that makes, and that's always been the state of the solutions architect role. Is it possible to land a solutions architect job on a remote basis? So, John, I've worked remotely as an architect since 2004. That's not true. I worked remotely as principal solutions architect for Riverstone Networks from South Brunswick, New Jersey, where I was living at the time. And then when I joined Cisco, I was fairly remote, and I joined them in 2003. Now, in 2003, for the first 6 months, I did make it to New York City, and my customer was in New Jersey, where I live, so I was there almost every day. And then I moved immediately into an executive architect role, and I would travel to see my clients. So, yes, I have a lot of architects that are remote. But, John, remote means the ability to travel to your client. the ability to speak to your client, because a lot of architecture is about building relationships. It's about selling. It's about leading teams, and you're going to have to be there for a lot. So I chose to live in Palm Beach, Florida, which meant I had to take a plane from West Palm Beach quite frequently in order to get to my environment, my customers and clients throughout the world. But yes, you can definitely work from home, but you will have to see your clients. As a cloud architect, your value proposition to businesses that you can run a system similar to, say, IBM? No. Ice cream, that is not going to help anyone. So, here's why nobody benefits from the cloud migration. I'm going to suggest this to all of you. And imagine you take the shirt off you're wearing and you put on a different shirt. Did you change anything about you? No. Nothing changed. Now, what if I had the ability to put you in a camp, and from 6 to 9 a.m. to 9 a.m. we did hardcore physical training, and then after that I enrolled you in classes all day long on business acumen, leadership skills, sales skills, executive presence, emotional intelligence, and we also trained you to be an architect. And you were in that academy for 12 months. At the end of that academy, don't you think you'll be fit? And don't you think you'll be knowledgeable and be an expert at something? That's changing something. So the reason all this cloud nonsense has been a disaster is not because of the cloud. It's because the people that were trying to create a system thought what they could do is move a system from one place to another place and help a business. Well, anybody that believes that, I really suggest this. Take your stuff from one closet and put it into another closet in your house and see how much it changes your life. Change one t-shirt for another t-shirt and see how much that changes your life. It'll do nothing. Now, ice cream, let's say we apply everything together. Now, let's say I trained you for a year. Now, I called a buddy of mine, and the buddy of mine is a chief information officer at, say, Cisco. And I know that the chief information officer that would be at Cisco is an executive who's very posh and very professional. And I know the person, and they show up in Armani suits every day to work. And that's that person. Now, if I train you and then I call that person and say, I need you to meet Ice Cream. Ice Cream is very strong, very solid. They go above and beyond. They've got a good set of leadership skills, a great set of executive presence and presentation skills, and they're solid on tech. Now, I tell you, put on that Armani suit. He wears Armani suits. He's fashion-oriented, or she's fashion-oriented. I don't care. And I tell you that, and I tell you what he or she likes and dislikes and the things that are important to you. No, don't you think you would have a different interview experience? Being incredibly competent, having somebody pre-sell you, and then knowing the person's appearance obsessed, going in there and putting in the appearance obsessed suit. So these things would change your opportunities. So, when I go into a cloud architecture and I'm like, all this stuff's on the cloud, and the people are saying the cloud's costing too much and we're not getting out of it, the first thing I say are, what are your business goals? Huh? Well, nobody's ever asked me that before. Where's your vision going from point A to point B? Can we talk about your business architecture? Now, I see that sales is a struggling place for you. What are your sales reps doing? Well, they're going out there on sales calls. Well, what kind of information do they have before the sales calls? None. And it's taping us 15 times. Okay, so what if we can create a solution for you that will give your sales reps more information before they go in there and shorten the sales cycle? Will that be interesting to you? Well, yeah. And then I go to their VP of sales and their SVP of sales, and I go to the sales reps and I say, how do you do your job? What is the flow of the way you do your job? Where are the sticking points? And then they tell us. And then we work backwards from that to create a strategy, to create the right application, to create the right network and the right infrastructure to make that sales rep sell 3 times more. That's transformation, just moving your stuff. I mean, that's the joke of the majority of these cloud migrations. And that's why cloud architects like me are now undoing those things, sticking some back in the data centers, moving things to other clouds, not doing silly things like putting all your eggs in one basket, being in a silly cloud. So now a set of cloud architects have an incredible amount of work to go fix all the stuff that people actually did in the beginning of the cloud. And I love this because it's an opportunity to help our clients and fix the things. Now, Ice Cream, there's a reason that I taught our clients back in 2000 OpenStack. And I had every one of my students not only learn the cloud, but build an OpenStack cloud. And I did that because I knew there was going to be a time where people would not be crazy to pay for some of these things. For example, Ice Cream, we run an OpenStack cloud. And I'll tell you why I run an OpenStack cloud. I have a 10-server OpenStack cloud, and each server has 24 cores and 256 gigs of RAM. We use it for labs. Why? Because when I looked at the AWS i3 instances, which are the identical processors, each one was $1,000 a month and another $100 a month for storage. Now, I bought these servers directly from Amazon for $1,000 each one. So I spent 10 grand. Now, if I use the AWS servers at $1,100 a month for per server, and I had 10 of them, or so $1,100 a month per server, it would be $10,000 a month times 48 months. It would have been $500,000 versus the $10 million to build my own cloud. So that's why we run on an OpenStack cloud. Now, as it turns out, those servers are still that same kind of $500,000 price, but now you can buy those servers from Amazon for $400 because they're depreciated even more. So think about this. But the ability to go to the cloud and take a new idea and bring it to market 3 times faster than your competition, that's a strategic advantage, and I can use that architecturally. And I can have a client pay a premium for that if they want a first mover advantage, and it'll still be cheap. They can do it to the cloud and then move it back. So later, or they can keep it on the cloud or whatever. So that's it. That's architecture. Again, it's not just moving stuff. And this is why companies find it hard to hire architects, because somebody passes something, they know the name of the service and how to configure it. I can't hire that person. They're not going to save my business. Okay, so I don't see any more questions coming in. So if there are no more questions, I want to tell you about a couple of fun things. On tomorrow at 11 a.m., we're going to have a webinar on how to become a security architect on Zoom. Guess what? If you've got questions about cloud architect, enterprise architect, AI architect roles, I'll happily answer them. It'll be on Zoom, so we'll go over the role. We'll talk exactly what we do. We'll talk about what employers are really looking for, which is the same reason our students are working at all these great companies like Amazon and Cisco and Google and IBM and Microsoft, Accenture, Deloitte, KPMG, Capgemini. I could go on forever because our clients work at all the best companies. So we can think about that, and we'll talk about it. I'll answer any questions you have. If you think you're ready for an interview and ready to be hired, I'll give you a mini interview, and if you can pass it, I'll even potentially recommend you to a recruiter I know if I see that's the case. And it's all free. So come, it's live, it's on Zoom, and join us. In the description of this video, we've got all kinds of guides to help you, guides on winning the interview, guides on being a cloud architect, guides on being an enterprise architect or an AI architect, certification guides on what's going to look good for your portfolio. They're all free. So check out the description to this video. And the other thing that I would say is this afternoon, we're having some fun. We're doing some more entry-level cybersecurity training, the CCSK. We're having fun with it. We've been here for the last couple of days. You can check them out, and my team will provide a link to that. And we'll be continuing the free entry-level cyber cloud security training, the CCSK program, for the rest of the week. So join us at that at 2 p.m. today. So I'm going to sign off for now. I'll be back on YouTube for 3 more hours today. I'd love to meet you in the Zoom webinar tomorrow. And guess what? Have a wonderful day. And if you've enjoyed it, give it a like, subscribe to our channel.